the feeling of total suspended life. Better than food, man. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. Great to see you as always. Hope you're staying sane. Yeah, me neither. Anyways, all right, last time I talked about Albert Camus was The Fall. And that was a terrific book, taking place in Amsterdam. Kind of eerie. Pretty good one, I'd recommend it. I've read The Stranger, I have not reviewed it, I enjoyed it. But it seems like everybody lately has been reading The Plague, for obvious reasons. And I wanted to discuss something, that pertains to this time of quarantine, other than Stephen King's The Stand, and which I am reading, and it's terrific so far. So I decided I gotta do it. So today is Camus' The Plague, La Peste. Just a heads up, this will contain spoilers. I began reading this because my friend Brian, who is also a patron of the show, recently did a post on it, which I'll link to below, and which I will quote later in the review. Just a quick thing, if you go down to where it says buy here in the description box below and you click the Amazon link, whatever you buy using that link, the show will get a kickback from. So if you buy books, like the book I'm reviewing today, which the link goes to directly, but if you stay in that, if you just use that link or any of the links in these reviews to go and purchase other books or anything you need, toilet paper, bidets, the show will get a kickback from that. So I greatly appreciate it and it really helps out. Thank you. Albert Camus barely needs an introduction for most of this audience, I'd wager. Camus was a French-Algerian journalist and author and playwright, among other things. Very, very successful. Died way too young at the age of 46 in a car crash. It's a terrible, terrible story. Camus is often associated with the idea of existentialism, though he did not prefer the term, and was rather focused on something that he referred to as the absurd, or absurdism, to the best of my knowledge, though I have not read a lot of Camus, or Sartre. I read Nausea, it was okay, but meh. The absurd is the conflict that occurs in the struggle for humans to find meaning in a seemingly meaningless universe. It's the conflict that arises between the need for rationality and the fundamental chaotic nature of the world, of the universe. According to Wikipedia, the universe and the human mind do not each separately cause the absurd, but rather the absurd arises by the contradictory nature of the two existing simultaneously. The sparks flying when the two butt up against each other, right? Our need for meaning and the universe's seeming total indifference towards it. You wish for meaning? Well, fuck you, sprinkle, sprinkle, plague, pandemic. The French champagne. I think the idea of the absurd started off with the Danish philosopher Kierkegaard, and then later came Camus, like a century, I think, or something, and wrote the essay, The Myth of Sisyphus. The image of that being, Sisyphus eternally pushing the boulder up the mountain. And in that essay, the absurd is the main focus. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. You remember that? It's an unsolvable problem. You can't, I almost think that we're just thinking in the wrong terms, honestly. But I don't know, of course. But anyways, long-winded. But with that in mind, let's get to The Plague, or La Peste, published in 1947. The book begins with an eerie series of events in the coastal city of Oran in French Algeria. The protagonist is a man, a doctor in his mid-30s named Bernard Rieu. Rats begin pouring out of nowhere in this town, coming into public, just a few of them at a time at first, and dying. Blood comes from their mouth, they twitch and die. The doctor sees this. There's a really grotesque, eerie omen scene where a rat dies in his apartment building, and he sees it. That's actually one of the most disturbing parts of the book, is the beginning, the dread that the book conjures with the rats. They don't seem to be attacking people, they just seem to be running from something and dying. And then there's a lot of them. And then hordes of dying rats coming into public. And everybody's like, no, it's fine, no big deal. Nobody's sure why. Then Rieu starts visiting patients and seeing these hideous symptoms. And eventually it's discovered that the town has an outbreak of plague. So they isolate themselves, they quarantine themselves, they set up these areas. And this is where it's gonna start sounding all too familiar. They have these areas which they set up and they shuttle off the infected to. They shut down the town, everything's on lockdown, nobody can come in, nobody can go out. If you try, you're shot. This happens in April. So, things escalate, of course. This is what happens, right? This is what we've all been seeing. This is what we've all been checking our phones daily to read about. Several other characters of varying degrees of eccentricity serve to flesh out the ideas of Camus regarding isolation, freedom, justice, good and evil, belief or non-belief in God. And some of them kind of sound like Camus, they sort of serve as I kind of see them as multiple parts of his opinions or views on things. There's Tarou, who keeps a diary about people in town that we're occasionally privy to. There's Rambert, a journalist who initially wants to escape the lockdown and return to the woman he loves, but eventually volunteers to help with the plague victims. There's Grand, who struggles to find the perfect sentence to open his novel for this book he's writing. And his perfectionism goes to a degree that is like insane. I mean, he never stops rewriting this damn sentence. He can't get past this first sentence. It's kind of the running gag of the book. There's Cotard, who in the beginning of the book tries to commit suicide, lives, he fails, and then slowly goes insane during the period of the plague. He might be one of the most interesting characters in the book for me, because he committed some crime. I don't know if we ever find out what, and was afraid the police were going to catch him. He tries to commit suicide, or maybe the police are after him because he tried to commit suicide. I don't know. He tries to commit suicide. He fails. And as things descend, his mood actually kind of evens out in the sense that everybody around him suddenly takes on the anxiety that he felt initially, where he was singled out. He was the only one feeling that kind of anxiety. So he actually calms down in a weird way. He's sort of like, yeah, well, I dealt with it first, right? So it's like, okay. So he can kind of navigate the new world better, which was very interesting to read. That was a curious part of the book for me. But he slowly goes insane, and especially as things get better and we get closer to the end. And then as things reach almost the level where the city opens back up, he does go completely insane. And he just takes a gun and starts shooting at people. And he kills a dog and all this stuff. It's like, that's one of the more interesting question marks in the book. It's never really resolved. And then finally there's Panelou, Father Panelou, who is a priest who has what seems in the end a crisis of faith, kind of. After witnessing, along with Ryu and several of the other characters, the horrific death of an innocent child, the death of the son of a judge, an innocent boy, and it's easily the most horrific scene in the entire book. Kind of the anchor which Camus' ideas all revolve around, especially in the question of faith, of believing in God. Because how do you believe in a God who would let something like that happen? And his description of this boy dying is a real illustration of just how cruel nature is. And just how indifferent to suffering it is. Truly. I mean, really. I think the biggest thing to take away regarding that would be that just the idea that Camus absolutely and understandably could not reconcile that with this belief in a loving God. No, it's a complete and total contradiction. It does not fit. It doesn't work. The problem is not solved. It's a total contradiction. So, if you have a world where stuff like that is happening to innocent people, to children, you do not have a world governed by a loving God. You do not. So, I mean, makes total sense. Makes total sense. And I would wager that most people who are convinced that it is are not people who have seen a kid die from plague. And I bet you if a lot of them did, they might think twice. But of course, that is not, believing in God is a great way to function. Churches build communities, something that atheists, really don't have. It's like, it binds people, religion binds people. It provides a foundation, it provides a structure. It's terrific for raising a family. You have a real advantage when you have a religious community. You do. It's the atheists, those who are secular, the wanderers, the lost people, the people who question, the confused, who are really in trouble. We don't have that kind of community. We don't have that kind of structure. We're constantly, we don't even trust ourselves. It's a problem. I mean, I think Welbeck said that he believed in God every time he went to church. But as soon as he came out and life got back to normal, it's an interesting thing, because I can't say it's all bad. It's clearly not. But no answers for that one. The greatest thing about the book for me, it perfectly mirrors, albeit to a greater degree that hopefully we do not reach, what most of the world is experiencing at this moment. The whole fucking world, or much of it, right? The feeling of total suspended life, an inability to plan for the future, cut off from society and their normal routines, unsure if they'll see their loved ones again soon, or in some more horrific cases, if they'll ever see them alive again. Our fellow citizens had fallen into line, adapted themselves, as people say, to the situation, because there was no way of doing otherwise. Naturally, they retained the attitudes of sadness and suffering, but they had ceased to feel their sting. Indeed, to some, Dr. Rieu among them, this precisely was the most disheartening thing, that the habit of despair is worse than despair itself. Hitherto, those who were parted had not been utterly unhappy. There was always a gleam of hope in the night of their distress, but that gleam had now died out. You could see them at street corners, in cafes or friends' houses, listless, indifferent, and looking so bored that, because of them, the whole town seemed like a railway waiting room. Those who had jobs went about them at the exact tempo of the plague, with dreary perseverance. Everyone was modest. For the first time, exiles from those they loved had no reluctance to talk freely about them, using the same words as everybody else, and regarding their deprivation from the same angle as that from which they viewed the latest statistics of the epidemic. This change was striking, since until now they had jealously withheld their personal grief from the common stock of suffering. Now they accepted its inclusion. Without memories, without hope, they lived for the moment only. Indeed, the here and now had come to mean everything to them, for there is no denying that the plague had gradually killed off, in all of us, the faculty, not of love only, but even of friendship. Naturally enough, since love asks something of the future, and nothing was left us but a series of present moments. Yeah. Tick-tock, man. It's incredible that a book written 73 years ago can do that. And as you can see, truly, some of the descriptions are directly describing what we are experiencing. That's the power of literature, and it does make you feel like you're not alone. That humanity has experienced this kind of thing before, and that maybe there's some hope, and things will eventually work out. And I think they will. Looks pretty good over here, but not yet. The lockdown in this town is long, though. It lasts like something from April to February of the next year, I believe. Quite a long time. But it's just like us. Every day the death count is released, everyone's worried about getting it. If someone does, they're isolated, nobody can leave town, and if they try, they could be shot. Thankfully, we don't have that. But everything becomes more expensive, people worry about food, the differences in class are exacerbated to a degree that is obvious and repulsive. Bodies are quickly buried under a layer of quicklime or burnt in a crematorium, and they have a modified streetcar that serves to now shuttle the bodies directly to the crematorium. It's sick, the whole thing. And a quiet madness begins to slowly creep in. But all of these ideas, brought up, all of these depictions and questions and themes, that's what I enjoyed about the book. And the idea, the questioning of a loving God in a world that allows for the agonizing death of innocent children. There's a priest in the town who gives a sermon, this is the character Panelu, that basically accuses the people of the town of bringing this on themselves. God's pissed, have some plague, you're all guilty, it's all your fault. What may be the most disturbing moment in the book is nearly all of the important characters witnessing the death of an innocent small boy, the son of a judge, from plague. Contorted and fighting this thing off internally, he finally screams. The last sound from this boy is a scream. He just belts it out, and that's how the child dies. In stunning agony. No mercy. And that shakes the priest up. The priest witnesses this, and later gives a much less confident sermon. and then shortly after, dies himself. Essentially, going from what one of Ryu's patients says in the book, an old man with asthma who miraculously survives this whole thing, is that essentially plague never ends, right? It's just the same as it ever was. We're in danger of being killed all the time, and it's the existential threat that we're forced to live with until the day our accident arrives. That accident, unfortunately, is inevitable, and it will find us all. But going back to the absurd, also an element of this book, like my good friend and writer Brian Robbins recently wrote in his post on this, for Camus, the most noble response to our absurd condition is to remain hopeful and optimistic in the face of an absurd universe, even in the face of a force so much greater than us, such as a pandemic, and continue to defiantly fight for our lives and the lives of those around us, aiding our community selflessly. Yeah, and I respect that. I totally do respect that. Though it's a different, it's like a broader work of fiction. It's kind of like, it's not concerned necessarily so much with the lives of individuals. I think for me, personally, I'm more interested in the lives, the psychology of the individual rather than the collective. In this book, I believe, is much more about the collective. There's a little bit of individual, but not really. It's far more about what Brian very eloquently wrote here. The things we need to do as a community to protect ourselves, protect each other, and everyone during a time where the individual doesn't matter as much anymore, and it's much more about just preserving the collective and getting shit done, you know? Okay, so what did I not like about this book? There's a few things. Remember the character who is rewriting this sentence over and over again, Grand? Well, that's kind of what the book suffers from, in that it suffers from this thing of variations on a theme, right? The same sentiment is repeated so much that it kind of ruins parts of the book for me, I think, you know? Pressed to prove that, I don't know if I could, but it felt, for some reason, like it was repetitive thematically. Like he was saying the same thing in just a slightly different way, as if the first time it wasn't convincing enough. I mean, about a third of this book could be cut and likely would not be missed. By me, at least. Also, the characters are all symbolic for various moral lessons or conflicts, right? But obviously so. This becomes, for me, uninteresting after a while. I mean, you have like these cardboard cutouts, these caricatures, not human beings. They're ideas, right? Only human in the slightly goofy, eccentric quirks they possess. More just like statements in flesh and blood, right? It wouldn't be so irritating, probably, if the book was shorter, I think. But after a while of sitting with this, you're just like, but they're kind of like statements in flesh and blood, you know? I believe this, and this character represents it this way. The School of Life recently did a video on this, and it was mentioned that this book was frequently brought up as the greatest European novel in the second half of the 20th century. I mean, it's good, but I don't know if I think that. I don't have an answer for the greatest European novel in the second half. I don't have an answer for the first half. I'm no authority. I still have much to read. It also says that the doctor, Ryu, is a version of Camus himself. That was a suspicion of mine that was confirmed. And it turns out that he's the narrator after all, near the end of the book. The video brings in a nice summary of the story and the meaning behind it. I suggest you check it out. I'll link to it below. The thing with Ryu is that he respects the necessity of duty, taking care of patients nonstop and lancing these buboes, which are swellings with infectious fluid in the lymph nodes. He does this stoically and mechanically, becoming numb, basically doing all he can just to keep going, and helping people, but becoming cold in the process. Just to keep functioning, it seems, just to keep from going insane. His wife was put in a sanatorium in the beginning, and then we discover that she dies near the end. He never sees her again after the tearful goodbye in the station near the beginning. And he never breaks and just becomes this stoic martyr. It's not really an honest portrait of a man, in my opinion. I've never known a doctor, though. I mean, I guess that takes a very special type of person, you know, to kind of, like my wife said, just it takes a very special kind of person who is not that sensitive and can kind of deal with that. But yeah, it's just not an honest portrait in my opinion, I guess. He just sort of serves as this symbol or emblem of humanism. That's what Sartre described of Camus at his funeral, his stubborn humanism. I get it. I just don't believe it, right? The most riled up the doctor gets is at the priest after the child dies. And even then, he like apologizes for the way he behaves or something like that. It's like, really? Are people that strong, really? For that long? It was a stretch for me, just saying. you could see it just as my laziness or my lack of strength in myself. But there's a breaking point within us all. And so that's one of my only complaints with the book, that it didn't give a realistic portrayal of the Doctor's breaking point. Because then he doesn't really seem human. Again, caricatures. I just feel like I would have understood the man more if I would have seen him break, as anyone would have. Because then it just has this taste of a morality tale, secular or not. Like it contains all this honesty and accurate description, but then when this character is concerned, it suddenly vanishes. Right? Maybe. There's also speculation over whether or not this book was an allegory for the Nazi invasion of France. I don't believe it actually was, but jury seems to be out on that one. I don't know if Camus actually meant that or not. I don't know if anybody knows. Honestly, given the circumstances you're reading about surrounding COVID-19 every day, it doesn't really need to be an allegory. It's pretty, interesting on its own. The premise of a pandemic really doesn't need to be a political metaphor to hit home, right? But for me, the real strength of this book, the real thing that's appealing to me, what makes it better than food, in my opinion, is the almost unbelievable ability to describe exactly what we're going through. I mean, amazing. Or went through, depending on when you're watching this. It is fucking uncanny. So I highly suggest you read it. Better than food, definitely. All right, coffee time. For those of you who are new, I take all of the patrons on Patreon who have donated $5 or more to the show, and I place them in this mason jar, and I pull out a name for every review I do, and I send that person whose name I pull out a hard copy of the book I'm reviewing, plus a bag of coffee, roasted by yours truly. However, right now, actually, just to be safe, I'm sending out bags from local Portland roasters who I like. So I'm temporarily not roasting because of all this. And the coffee is delicious, trust me. Portland is like the coffee town. So, you're gonna get something good, definitely. Just wanted to give you a heads up. If you would like to get in on that, you can click on the link in the description box below or go to patreon.com/books are better than food and donate $5 or more per video. Thank you very much. And thanks to all the new patrons, I really appreciate it. Donating $1 or more, you'll get access to the patron-only reviews, plus the Better Than Friday newsletter I send out every Friday, which is just 5 things that I'm interested in at any given time. Could be books in the pipeline, films, music or music videos and stuff, or articles. Changes week to week. If you think we have similar taste, I think you'll get a lot of value out of that. So, anyways, thank you very much, and to all the patrons, best of luck. Okay, here we go. Okay. Liliana. Thank you very much, Liliana. Really appreciate it. You're going to receive The Plague by Albert Camus, plus a bag of delicious coffee. All right, well, that is all I have for you today. You doing okay? Yeah? Good. Okay, just checking. You be careful. And I'll be careful too. You stay home. You wear that mask. You do it. Now. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Please hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this. And always remember, bring a book, wherever you go. Although I imagine if you're being safe, you're not going many places. So just stick around. Just chill with your books. It's a good plan. All right, take care of yourselves. Great to see you as always. Have a good night. Talk to you soon. Ciao.